Hello and welcome to Art Karlsruhe Selections. Due to the current circumstances, for the first time, the Art Karlsruhe offers a digital program called Art Karlsruhe Selections from May 20 to May 23rd, with a variety of talks, digital tours, art and conversation. My name is Anabel Rodríguez. I'm an independent curator and art historian, and I have the pleasure to present you a few selected highlights. Allow me a little caveat first. Due to time and the sort of selection, because we have 190 galleries participating in this year's fair, allow me to remind you that you're always welcome to visit the Artist Index and the Gallery Index on the homepage of Art Karlsruhe to find more wonderful artistic positions to discover. For this presentation, I selected a variety of highlights that are sort of mirroring the youth theme of the fair. One theme is the materiality in art, so materials are interesting materials. Art in times of crisis with a very social focus. And last but not least, women artists. Before I start with the selection of my positions, let me allow you to remind you of the fair concept in case you've never been to Karlsruhe. We have 4 exhibition halls. Hall 1 hosts the print graphic works and editions. It's a hall that's very dear to the founder of the fair, Eva Schade, because prints allow easier access point for collections and they might be more affordable. Hall 4 hosts also private collectors who get invited to the fair. This year, Maria Lucia and Ingo Glöcker collect a powerhouse couple based in Bad Homburg, close to Frankfurt, were supposed to exhibit parts of the collection with a focus on female portraits. Hall 2 hosts post-war and modern positions. Hall 3 hosts modern art and contemporary positions, and Hall 4 hosts emerging artists and contemporary art. Now let's dive into the artistic positions. So the first position I would like to introduce is Fahal Salih. He was born in Belgrade, former Yugoslavia, as a son of an Iraqi and a Serbian mother. He grew up in Kuwait, later lived in Vienna, and now living in Germany. As you can see from his CV, it's rather difficult to pinpoint him to one country. And I find that very interesting. As an art historian, I'm trained to think in categories. I'm trained to think in a linear position in development. But if we're looking into artists' lives, it's rather difficult to find a linearity and think in artists' life topics that are circling back and forth. You can think about certain progress, of course, but usually it's the artist's life, the form of success and failure, the way materials and life sort of tells the story that informs the art, right? So one of the big themes and topics that becomes of this golden thread for this artist is the definition of home, or whatever home means. For most people who have a migrational experience, home remains this very difficult concept of something that you long for and something that can become also very narrow, something that connects you to origin, to lineage, but also something that separates you maybe. Something that becomes this abstract, very big question mark for many people, something that where we find refuge and protection. In his Shelter series, these topics sort of become a home on the canvas. As you can see here, he works in action painting manner. So he does not work with tools. He applies hands on the canvas and inscribes in his form the abstract shelter. So that's the symbol form of the shelter on the canvas. Before he started with a sole depiction of the shelters, there was a big series before that, Mountain Shelter and Meadows. So landscape painting in the most traditional sense. And landscape painting conveys a woman. Very interesting to see that were sort of his origins, as landscape painting has a relationship to tell between the body and its surrounding. It tells the story of how we see the surrounding. And humans are in the whole artistic development. Landscape paintings always told a story of conquering nature and being in harmony with nature, or the sort of relationship we developed in his other series, the mosaics do both a bridge between his European present and also his Middle Eastern past. So the mosaics with patterns and pictures became widespread in classical times, both in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Early Christian basilicas from the 4th century onwards were decorated with gold, including mosaics. And in Islamic art, geometric patterns and shapes form highly sophisticated forms and shapes based on mathematical precision, and are formed amazingly complicated. As you can see here, he uses a very particular, very mundane material. He uses sponges, and the verse is basically the sophistication behind mosaics. His thoughts around home, shelter, we find an embodiment in this material. It's the same material he uses later for the sculptures of shelter. So he uses sponges to build buildings that are waterborne, which is a very interesting see there's a connection between shelter, refuge, war, and political context. We continue with his more recent series, Baghdad Blues. You see here the photograph, Luna Park 3. This is a photograph of the fence around the Lake Tigris that is protecting the neighborhood from bombings from terrorists who were coming from the Tigris into the neighborhood, but it's also the same time separating this neighborhood from parts of the city, also the Tigris. Despite the whole political context that I won't go too much into, it's interesting because a fence and a border are architectures of separation and security that always remind me of threat. In this case, this fence was decorated with this colorful lights, and they sort of evoke bizarre amusement park. This is also the reason for the title Luna Park, sort of evoking this amusement park atmosphere. So it's interesting because around the world we do see fences and borders decorated, and there's a difference if people living in this area wanting to decorate and be more playful with this border. I mean, as much as you can be playful with the border, right? But there's also a difference between being playful against threat. I find this just a position that safety, security, this architecture, this a very military architecture, and this childlike thinking of colorful lights, a very interesting way to juxtapose. Within the series, we also see this images taking within the house. I find this interesting. I started the presentation showing how the series in form, not a concrete form, it's more like an abstract, thinking about the concept. We see in sponges. Now, for the first time, we just see the interior of the houses. And we see a woman here lying on a sofa, trying to rest. What you cannot see in this angle, the background of the photograph, there's a woman in the kitchen. She looks a little bit, the paintings in there. We do have like this beautiful interior. And again, which you cannot see, but what is other photographs in the same surrounding. On the left, there's with breaking news. This little moment of rest. This woman is capable of taking her home, is invaded with it breaking news. There is always a constant step appearing somewhere, and even this home feels like a respite, a home, a really proper home, is constantly under attack from outside. We're building a bridge. As you can see, the first artists I'm presenting are artists working with very interesting materials, and we continue this journey with Stefan Bircheneder. He's a Bavarian artist with a fascinating scene. Before he became a professional visual artist, he worked as a street painter. A lot of his series are informed by the former GDR, and he's very interested in industrial break. So, in the transition period of the former GDR to old German economic way of thinking, a lot of companies lost their ability to continue to work with the government. And it's interesting to see how this sort of transition remains a constant topic in nowadays politics. And we can see that in a lot of the ways he depicts. So everything you see here is painted on canvas. So this is the first part where materiality appears in the art. But then again, it's always connected to this social political exploration. Here in his painting Chefetage, which is the executive floor, we do see the filing cabinets, we do see documents still within the filing cabinets. You have to have in mind that the artist visits this place, does visit these industrial ruins, goes into often rather dangerous industrial buildings that are about to collapse. He takes a lot of images, and then he comes back into his studio and does the image collages. So while he does visit the buildings, the painting at the end might be meticulously be a collage of different things he has seen in the building in order to convey a certain vision. In this executive floor, I mean, a manager is always in charge of structure. And you can see that the documents are still in place, so a certain structure still sort of in place. And also the ceiling, if you look at that, there's still a very structure to the whole rotting system happening. An image that I find heartbreaking, Solo Selbstständige, which is the solopreneur, the praxis. I cannot stop thinking if the dream was ending. And I mean, in the center of this painting, you see electric faces. And you have to wonder how the owner will be able to stand on one foot. And I mean, of course, this is rather a symbol, but if you look at the year 2020 as the last year, it's quite an interesting and powerful image for a year that a lot of freelancers and solopreneurs had a really tough time and felt like they were standing on one leg because for many, the income levels were stripped and they were barely finding a balance with so many demands they were having. We continue our journey through interesting materials. Sonia Anifetti, a Portuguese artist, living and working today in Brussels. She constantly plays between painting and embroidery in her work. Her main themes are collage made from artistic painting, classification, mechanically applied threads. She's really interested in ancient mythology and more contemporary themes surrounding identity, childhood memories, and personal narratives. And her recent series is rather an ethereal theme. I mean, Stairway to Heaven, there's not much that I need to add on that. Very evocative way of mixed media in order to create this ethereal atmosphere. And the other piece that I find very is the piece Stay, where you can see two person kissing each other and stretching into this infinite kiss, and also in dialogue with the materials. This the laces and the next artist I'm presenting is Alfredo Chamal. He's a Mexican artist who explores with their hyper-realist language topics of his own everyday nature. Anecdotes which stand out with his research around femininity and certain characters. His last works explore his own femininity, using a mannequin as a metaphor, which has the leading role in his film. The artworks are inspired by photographs that he himself captures. They're intimate, intriguing, and often gentle images. And the most interesting, most fascinating part is that while the hyper-realist images evoke a very precious material, he paints everything with ballpoint pen. And I find it very interesting what the artist says about his own art. For me, art has always been something quotidian. I have been using the same tools I used when I was a child to create my artworks, and that has an extreme connection with my current work. Another artist, but who remain in the gallery, Victor Loper from Spain. The artist is Concha Martinez Barreto, a Spanish artist who uses different techniques in order to work around the topics of fragility of memory, identity, intergenerational connection, definitely. In a series Untitled, she has been working through old photographs, and these paintings turn into sort of an archive, a family album with deformation and different scales. And I find it very interesting how she's able to build bridges between memory being reminded of something, and photography, it is particularly clear what I'm talking about. At this piece where we see larger than life sheep. And when we're talking about memory, in our memory, certain things do have a very big priority, very, very important role. And oftentimes, when we think about our pets that do become larger than life, and they do, in our memories, get a different role and different magnitude. In a different series that the artist has been working with, the Stratton series, the artist writes, I'm quoting her, the work of archaeologists consists in going deep in the sites and reading the different stratum, the deposits that time has gathered up on things. Through excavation, they intend to understand the past and talk with it in order to be able somehow to rebuild it. In this series, I operate based on this model of time, leaving aside the layers and instants of the past. But in my case, it is not about flipping back, but to make the past be present. The photograph becomes like a deep space. There's a lowland in which would be buried everything that we are, simply waiting for the stratons to be removed, one after the other. I do find this juxtaposition between two photographs very interesting, because in the relationship that both builds, there's a narrative bridge can go along, and the viewer, we do see in this case a young boy, and we don't see his face. Like on his face, there's a bridge. One can only wonder what is the relationship. Is it information that this boy is connected to this bridge? Did he live close to it? Is their family tied to this bridge? Same in the photograph within the same series. So on the right you can see the whole photograph, and on the left you can see the close-up. You can see sheep, and you can see in this small frame probably farmer, and one wonders, are the sheep of this farmer, are the people related to the land that we can see there? Are they maybe living actually in the house? And again, we do have certain relationship ties within the frame that connects us to a certain narrative, and I find it highly interesting. We have from the French gallery, the Gallery That collection, the Brazilian artist Garcia Vasconcelos, and his series A Picturesque Voyage through Brazil. This series of photographs was made between 2015 and 2019, where he explored the Amazon rainforest by foot, and he's really going through color schemes and certain interlacing plant motifs, and explores the themes of traveling, in particular the theme of exploration. He's very interesting in recreating paintings and sketches, or at least evoking paintings and sketches made during the 18th and 19th century expedition. When I saw the first time this photographic series of them, I was very surprised of the way he wanted to depict it, especially because, as I mentioned before, landscape, at least in my understanding, is never a neutral understanding. It's always about the relationship. And in times of climate change, we are very aware that the political decisions and so do impact the Amazon. There's still indigenous people living there, and I find this whole connection to exploring the Amazon through this sort of photography, a very interesting way to think about nature, not just in documentary perspective of photography, but actually making a comment through the way he's photographing the painting, the forest. The next position I'd like to present is Christopher Limpool, a Berlin-based artist. He's not a studio painter. Well, actually, he's all the contrary. He's a plein air painter in the German Impressionist tradition, that he paints in front of the motifs you're seeing. And it might sound very romantic, but he's a very hardworking artist, not just in sunshine, but also in rain. He does not shy away to work under quite harsh circumstances as well. And it's interesting that when you're having a chance to stand in front of one of his paintings, you often do find little reminders of the places where he painted. You find little twigs, little insects, little leaves that are often worked into the thick layers of oil painting. And it's a very sensual way to perceive his paintings. When you're standing close to them, you can smell the oil painting. You can see where the artist touched the canvas, how he almost modeled with layers of paint the motifs. We do remain in Berlin, so the next artist I'd like to present is Timur Mazam. His path took Timur Mazam from Syria to Damascus via Dubai, Damenhorst to Berlin, where he has been working and living with his family since 2018. Trained as a painter, his work comprises a wide range of techniques and styles. The quiet, reduced, almost abstract paintings of his early years were followed by photo montages where, after his arrival in Dubai, the artist addresses directly conflict and history. Since his arrival in Germany, he has been making collage-like paintings consisting of up to 50,000 small, sometimes tiny photographs that he usually paints beforehand. These are assembled in several layers of abstract mosaic-like representations of people, buildings, and structures. I find that fragmentation in his works quite an interesting way to depict or to refuse one-dimensional expectation that a lot of artists with a migrational perspective have fun with. The moment where you have to explain where you're coming from, the moment where you have to find words for trauma, the way you have to expose your own ability. This fragmentation here in his works is sort of a confrontation, asking back, are these words abstract or figurative, and what do they show? Do they show destruction, or do they show reconfiguration? And what this reconfiguration actually, or does he paint a new way of seeing a perspective, and something that he gained through his journey that he made? We continue our journey through this year's Art Karlsruhe. We remain in Berlin, represented by the gallery Rodríguez. Different from what we've seen with the paintings of Christopher Limpool, Rodríguez is a city painter, even though his motives are highly influenced by living in Berlin and stories from the city and people living there. But they are also influenced through mythology and other. His paintings live from the in-between, the inspiration, and abstraction. You will find traces of people who might recognize people, and yet their expressions are often visible. He works in many layers, burying layers, figures underneath, creating sort of this internal archive of the landscapes are sort of multiverseless traces of reality that actually taking the liberty to question truth. In fact, questioning that our reality is a very individual perception. The topics are very existential in the most literal sense. They are not about beautification of reality, but in search of the fragments of human life seen through the eyes of the artist. And I'd like to continue in the same gallery and with a focus on the human experience. The human existence is sort of the golden thread in the paintings. It's her interest in our obsessed with self-improvement and staging. It's always showing our best self. I'm actually asking, this is the only truth we're presenting, and what's beyond any stage? And the true answers of desire and loneliness. And it's these two topics that she explores in all of her pieces in very different shades. And even though Pinarat portrays real people, close friends, she refuses to call herself a portraitist because she says that firstly, she does not work with the person sitting for her. She is very aware of their needs, and this awareness would hinder her to explore the topic she's interested in. And secondly, as a portraitist, would be interested in depicting the person she is. She's more interested in exploring something new. She usually works with the female figure. There are just very few exceptions to this rule. She's very interested in the societal expectations and pressure that are put on women. Beauty standards around age, success, rules, and standards that remain very exhausting for women to do. Her works are vulnerable pleas for diversity. They do question beauty standards, staging the self-improvement, constant productivity. She works against any linear narration. They would be around success, beauty, age, sickness, and failure. The artist is very open when it comes to her own struggles with mental health and how her experiences shaped a lot of her understanding. Every time I see her painting, I've been talking to the artist quite a bit. I have been reminded of a book that has shaped a lot of my understanding around loneliness, and it's the book The Lonely City Adventures of the Art of Being Alone by the British author Olivia Lyne. In this context, I'd like to quote a little paragraph that fits beautifully in the context of, and I quote, "There's a gentrification that is happening to cities, and there's a gentrification that is happening to the emotions too, with a similarly homogenizing, whitening, deadening. Amidst the glossy capitalism, we have sublimation, that all difficult feeling, depression, anxiety, loneliness, rage, are simply a consequence of unsettled chemistry, a problem to be fixed, rather than a response to structural injustice, or, on the other hand, to the native texture of embodiment, in time." David Bonarovich memorably put it, "A rented body with all time and restoration." We remain on the subject of human condition. The next artist is Maya Riga, and it's Miriam Khan. Miriam Khan is this Swiss woman, and she's been usually talked about in the context of feminism. Before I start to introduce her work, let me remind you that women in Switzerland gained the right to vote in federal elections after the referendum in February 1971. In 1991, though, following a decision by the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland, became the last Swiss canton to grant women the vote on local issues in 1991. So this is just a little reminder about the context that she has been working in. In her pictorial worlds, this was out and pushes for the abolishment of societal norms and encounters the traditional representation of gender-specific roles. From her early works, which are strongly influenced by feminism, to her later creations, the focus of her paintings has been the body. Clearly outlined in the contours, the body nevertheless dissolves into the surroundings. In her thinking, the artist often explores the boundary between inside and outside, what actually constitutes being human. Recurrent themes within her work are complex interpersonal relationships, family constellation, women and society as well as refuge, war, and violence. The artist pictures demons, gender and all the fragility. Particularly in the later oil paintings, the artist finds new ways of depicting the fragmentation of identity beyond binary gender discourses. In this painting, Heaven Leading Fremdkörper, roughly translates into laying around foreign body, she goes into a very political notion of what constitutes to be foreign, what constitutes fitting in. Taking the black, penetrating face is one of these paintings that feels provocative. But why does it feel provocative? Because we do have the genitals right in front of us. It reminds us of an historical example, Le Régime du Monde. It's very interesting because this woman portrait here refuses to be the object. She's the one looking back. So this is her penetrating face looking at the one who's looking at her. Jamie Eisenstein blurs distinctions between performance and sculpture, often through the use of her own body as ready-made object in her inhabited sculptures, thereby questioning the notion of life in her work. Eisenstein reflects on the concept of art living beyond its creator, the role of the artist's hand, quite literally, within a work of art most often utilizing the lexicon of comedy and magic as metaphors for context. She does that in her wonderful sculptures here, the mirror wig and the mob wig. Last but not least, we are slowly coming to the end of this presentation with the marvelous artist François Gillot. The French painter is celebrating this year on November 26th, 100 years around this day. For this extraordinary occasion, the gallery is providing a big exhibition and hopefully a remarkable celebration. She rebelled against her strict parents' ambition for her and quit law school to be an artist in Paris, where she met Pablo Picasso in 1943 when she was just 21 years old. They spent 10 years together. They never married, but they had 2 children, Claude and Paloma. Then she left him. She was the only woman who ever did, and he basically declared war on her, prohibiting French gallerists to show her work, which made her to leave Paris for London with a tape decker studio, and she later in 1961 went to New York. She published in 1964 her best-selling memoir, Life of Picasso, a vivid account of the life with him, but actually, moreover, it's also a very intimate panorama of life in Paris during and after the German occupation, a Paris populated by Georges Braque, Alberto Giacometti. I'm going to mention two other books that I find highly interesting in the context, just to provide you with a little food for thought. Taschen published her travel notebooks from her trips in Venice, Senegal, and India. And another book that I find really astonishing is a book about women conversations with a writer and a painter from 2013. Lisa Alter and François Chelot have been friends for more than 25 years. Although both come from very different backgrounds, from different generations, they found they have a great deal in common. Women who manage to support themselves using the art while simultaneously balance the obligations of work and parenthood. Her paintings are characterized by a preference for organic forms. Her later paintings feature saturated color relationships and structured composition. Over time, her practice has expanded to include printmaking techniques such as monographs and aquarelles. That's been it. This has been the presentation for this year's Art Karlsruhe. Please visit the homepage. You will find additional information about the galleries and moreover, more videos and more conversations around this year's It's been a pleasure to guide you through and to give you a little glimpse into this year. I hope to see you next year in person. Until then, remain healthy and safe. Thanks you very much.